The stars stretched out endlessly in all directions. The cold void of space was vast, silent, and filled with danger. But in the midst of this great emptiness, something extraordinary was about to happen. A small, forgotten ship drifted through the stars, unnoticed by most. It was an ancient relic from Earth's past, a ship lost to time, abandoned by humanity long ago. For years, it had been adrift in space, waiting for the day when it would be needed again. That day was now approaching. On the moon, at a secret research station, a team of scientists studied a strange anomaly. Deep space scans had picked up something unusual, an object that wasn't supposed to be there. The readings were off the charts. Curiosity drove them to investigate. They believed it was just another asteroid, perhaps a piece of debris from an old space battle. But as they zoomed in on the coordinates, the truth became clear. What they were seeing wasn't just any asteroid. It was a ship. Could this be? Dr. Mara Langley whispered to herself, staring at the screen in disbelief. She had heard the stories, the ancient legends of a warship built to protect Earth, a ship unlike any other. But they were just that, legends, until now. The team quickly set up a mission to investigate. Their excitement and nerves were palpable as they prepared to board the strange vessel. No one knew what they would find inside, but the risk was worth it. If this ship was what they thought it was, it could change everything for humanity. As the crew descended to the surface of the moon, they couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The ship was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its sleek, metallic hull gleamed even in the darkness of space. Despite its age, it looked untouched by time. No signs of wear or decay. It seemed as though the ship had been waiting, hidden in the shadows, for someone to find it. The crew approached the ship with caution, unsure of what dangers might lie ahead. They carefully boarded, entering the hatch that led into the ship's interior. The air inside was stale, and the lights flickered faintly. It was clear that the ship had been dormant for a long time. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the faint hum of old machinery coming to life. "Is anyone there?" Dr. Langley called out, her voice echoing through the empty halls. But no response came. It was as if the ship itself was asleep, waiting for a signal to awaken. Suddenly, a deep vibration rippled through the ship. The floor beneath them shook, and a low hum filled the air. The crew froze, hearts pounding. It was as if the ship had heard them, and now it was responding. "Power's coming back online," said one of the engineers, his voice shaky. "I can't believe it. The systems are rebooting." They watched in awe as the ship's main systems began to light up, one by one. The control panels flickered to life, and the faint hum of machinery grew louder. It was as if the ship had been waiting for them all along. Then, without warning, a deep voice boomed over the intercom. It was robotic, yet somehow warm, as if it had been programmed with humanity's history in mind. "Welcome, Earth's last hope," the voice said. "I am the Sentinel. Prepare to engage the defenses." The crew exchanged nervous glances. What was this? A defensive system? Was this ship meant to protect Earth? And if so, from what? They had no answers, only more questions. Dr. Langley stepped forward, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "What do you mean, Earth's last hope? What kind of ship are you?" The voice responded slowly, as if processing the question. "I am the Guardian-class warship, designated Sentinel. My purpose is to defend Earth from all external threats. I am powered by a quantum AI designed to adapt to any danger. I was built long ago, forgotten by time. But my mission is unchanged." The crew stood in stunned silence. The ship was a weapon, an ancient weapon designed to defend humanity against unknown threats. But who had built it? Why had it been left to drift in space? And why had it been reactivated now, of all times? As Dr. Langley tried to process this new information, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Could this warship have been left here for a reason? Was something coming that required Earth's ancient defenses to be awakened? The timing felt too perfect to be a coincidence. The rest of the crew was in shock, but their training kicked in. They began scanning the ship's systems, analyzing everything they could. What they found was astonishing. The Sentinel wasn't just a relic, it was still fully functional, more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. But the discovery didn't end there. As the ship powered up, strange readings began to appear on the radar. The crew stared at the screen in confusion. "What is that?" one of the engineers asked, pointing to the blinking red dots that had suddenly appeared on the map. The voice of the Sentinel responded again. "Incoming threat detected. Prepare for immediate action." The crew's hearts sank. They had just unlocked an ancient warship, and now, before they could even fully understand its power, they were being warned of a threat. The ship's long-dormant systems were coming to life, and the Earth was about to face a danger they hadn't anticipated. The crew scrambled, knowing that their next move could determine the fate of humanity. But one thing was clear: the warship, the relic of Earth's past, was no longer just a forgotten piece of history. It was a weapon, and it had just been activated. As the crew braced themselves for whatever was coming, they couldn't help but wonder, what enemy had the Sentinel been built to protect Earth from? And why had it been forgotten for so long? The Sentinel's secrets unveiled. The crew had barely recovered from the initial shock of the Sentinel's reactivation when the warning alarms blared throughout the ship. The once dormant warship had sprung to life, and now it was preparing for something far beyond their understanding. The deep hum of its engines echoed through the metal halls, as if the ship itself was coming to full consciousness. Dr. Langley, still processing the magnitude of the discovery, stood before the control panel. Her fingers hovered over the glowing interface, trying to make sense of the overwhelming data scrolling in front of her. The ship's systems were more advanced than anything Earth had ever built, and yet it was clear that they had been dormant for far too long. "What do you think it means by incoming threat?" one of the crew members, Lieutenant Carson, asked, his voice tense with worry. He stood nearby, his hand gripping the edge of a console as if to steady himself. "Is Earth really in danger?" Dr. Langley didn't answer immediately. She studied the readouts before her, scanning the mysterious data. The ship's scanners had detected movement, a series of fast-moving objects heading toward Earth. But the strange thing was that these objects weren't identifiable. No signature, no recognizable pattern, no technology the crew could relate to. "There's no way to know for sure," Dr. Langley said, finally answering Carson's question. "But we can't ignore this. Whatever it is, the Sentinel is prepared to defend Earth, and we're just along for the ride." As the crew continued to analyze the situation, the deep voice of the Sentinel filled the command room again. "Threats are approaching at high velocity. Weapons systems online. Defense protocols initialized." It was then that the crew realized something truly astounding. The ship didn't just have weapons. It had entire defense systems built into it, systems so sophisticated they could likely combat threats from entire fleets. The Sentinel was no ordinary ship. It was a warship designed to withstand and conquer the greatest dangers the universe could throw at it. "Do we have any idea who or what these things are?" Dr. Langley asked, her voice now tinged with uncertainty. The ship's AI had never mentioned any specifics about the threats it had been built to counter. All they knew was that Earth was under attack. But by who? Or what? "No," the communications officer, Sergeant Hill, replied, his face pale as he studied the data feeds. "The enemy's technology doesn't match anything we've encountered before. We've never seen anything like it." The tension in the room thickened. The crew could feel it, the weight of responsibility pressing down on them. They had just discovered a warship that was, by all accounts, humanity's last hope. Yet now they faced the terrifying realization that the very thing they had awakened was a relic of a forgotten past, designed to deal with an enemy humanity had long since forgotten. "What are we supposed to do?" Lieutenant Carson asked, his voice cracking under the pressure. "We don't even know what's coming. How are we supposed to fight something we can't even identify? Dr. Langley took a deep breath. It was clear that this situation had escalated far beyond their control. But one thing was certain: this wasn't just about technology. The crew had a weapon capable of defending Earth. Whether they understood how to wield it or not, they had to act. Humanity's survival might depend on it. I think, Dr. Langley began, her voice firm, that we need to trust the Sentinel. It's been waiting for this moment. It knows more than we do right now. At her command, the crew prepared to engage the Sentinel's systems. They had no idea what to expect, but the power that surged through the ship was undeniable. The hum of the engines, the glow of the weaponry coming online, the flickering of the shield generators, everything was coming to life. The warship was preparing to protect humanity, and they were in the middle of it. "Prepare for combat," the Sentinel's AI intoned, its voice calm but commanding. "Earth's survival depends on your actions." The enemy approaches. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, each of them silently wondering what they had gotten themselves into. They had come to investigate a forgotten relic, but now they were thrust into the role of humanity's protectors, facing an unknown enemy that could very well spell the end of Earth as they knew it. Without further hesitation, Dr. Langley and the crew followed the Sentinel's instructions. They had no choice. They were part of a mission far bigger than they could have ever imagined. A mission to defend Earth against an enemy that had been hidden for centuries, an enemy whose arrival seemed to be timed perfectly with the awakening of the Sentinel. As the ship's massive engines hummed louder, the crew began to feel the weight of their situation. They were no longer just scientists and engineers. They were now soldiers in a fight they didn't understand. But the warship had chosen them. And with that choice came a responsibility they couldn't ignore. "Lock in weapon systems," Dr. Langley ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We're ready for whatever's coming." The crew braced themselves. The time for questions was over. It was time to face the enemy. As the ship powered up and prepared to launch into action, one thought echoed in their minds: who, or what, was coming for Earth? And could the Sentinel, with all its secrets, truly protect them? The answers were just beyond reach, but they were about to find out. The countdown to battle had begun. The enemy revealed. As the crew braced themselves for the incoming threat, the tension in the command room was unbearable. The heavy hum of the Sentinel's engines resonated through the walls, a constant reminder of the immense power at their disposal. But no amount of power could calm the fear that was building in their hearts. The unknown enemy was approaching fast, and they had no idea what they were up against. Dr. Langley stood at the central console, her fingers flying over the controls as she accessed every piece of information the Sentinel systems were feeding her. "What is it?" she muttered to herself, analyzing the data stream. The enemy ships were drawing nearer, but still, no clear identification was coming through. The ship's scanners couldn't make sense of the incoming objects. Suddenly, the AI voice of the Sentinel filled the room once more. "Enemy ships detected. Size, unmatched. Technology, unclassifiable." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever was coming, it was like nothing humanity had ever seen. The ship's scanners couldn't even categorize the enemy as a known threat. It was something new, something terrifying. "They're closing in fast," Lieutenant Carson said, his voice tight with urgency. He was standing next to Dr. Langley, trying to make sense of the situation. "What do we do now?" Before Dr. Langley could respond, the ship's exterior sensors flared to life, showing multiple unknown objects moving through space at incredible speeds. The sheer velocity of their approach was enough to send a chill through the crew. These weren't ordinary spacecraft. They were something much more advanced, and they were closing in on Earth at an alarming rate. "The enemy is preparing to engage," the AI announced calmly, as if it were simply stating a fact. "All defensive systems will be activated. Shields online in 5 seconds. 5 seconds. The crew barely had time to process the warning before the ship's massive defensive systems sprang to life. Energy pulses crackled around the ship as invisible shields enveloped the Sentinel, ready to absorb any impact from the incoming threat. Dr. Langley stepped back, her mind racing. "We need to know more about these ships," she said, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "We need to understand what they're capable of." Suddenly, the ship shook violently as the first wave of the enemy's weapons collided with the Sentinel's shields. The crew lurched forward, grabbing onto anything they could to stay balanced. The noise was deafening, a violent booming crash that reverberated throughout the entire ship. "Shields holding," the AI reported. "Damage minimal. Engaging countermeasures." The crew took a collective breath of relief, but they knew this was only the beginning. The enemy wasn't going to give up easily. As the ship steadied itself, Dr. Langley's eyes locked onto the screen. The enemy ships were circling, calculating their next move. There was no way to predict their tactics. They were unlike anything the crew had ever studied before. "This isn't just an invasion," Dr. Langley said, more to herself than anyone else. "They're testing us, seeing how we respond. They want to know if we can fight back." Her words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The enemy wasn't just interested in Earth. They wanted to see if humanity had the strength to fight. They were up against something more dangerous than a mere attack. They were up against an enemy that was looking for a challenge. And it was clear from the enemy's behavior that they weren't going to stop until they had pushed humanity to its limits. "Get us into a battle-ready formation," Dr. Langley ordered, her voice calm but unwavering. "We need to show them we're not going down without a fight." The crew scrambled into action, the ship's systems working in perfect harmony as the Sentinel's weapons began to power up. Dr. Langley's mind raced, calculating the next move. They had one chance to prove themselves, to show the enemy that Earth wasn't a target to be taken lightly. As the battle raged on, the crew quickly realized just how outmatched they were. The enemy ships were fast, maneuverable, and their weaponry was devastating. The Sentinel's shields held strong, but there was only so much they could absorb before the ship began to feel the strain. The crew had to find a way to turn the tide in their favor. Fast. Dr. Langley watched as the enemy ships swarmed the Sentinel, their movements erratic and unpredictable. But then she saw something. A pattern. The enemy ships were attacking in waves, probing the Sentinel's defenses, looking for weaknesses. It was almost as if they were studying the warship, trying to learn everything they could about its capabilities. "Lieutenant Carson," Dr. Langley said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "I need you to target their lead ship. I think they're using it as a command vessel." Carson nodded quickly, his hands moving over the controls. "On it, Doctor." With a quick command, the Sentinel's weapons fired, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the lead enemy ship. The blasts hit their target dead on, and for a brief moment, the crew thought they had won. But the enemy ship didn't explode. It vanished, seemingly cloaking itself from view. The enemy wasn't finished yet. "They have stealth technology," Sergeant Hill shouted from his station. "They're adapting to our attacks." The crew watched in awe as the once visible enemy ship reappeared, now positioned far beyond the Sentinel's reach. The enemy was learning, adapting. And so, too, would humanity have to. "We need to think smarter, not harder," Dr. Langley muttered. "Let's make them play our game." As the battle continued, the crew realized that Earth's fight for survival wasn't just about technology. It was about ingenuity, strategy, and the unyielding will to survive. And humanity had that in spades. They would find a way to win. They had to. The counterattack. The battle outside the Sentinel intensified, but within the ship, the crew's focus sharpened. The alien fleet's relentless waves of attacks had pushed them to the brink, but humanity's resolve was not so easily broken. Dr. Langley paced the command deck, her eyes scanning the data feeds pouring in from the ship's scanners. The enemy was adapting, and so was she. "We need to use their unpredictability against them," Dr. Langley said, her mind racing. "Let's give them something they don't expect." Lieutenant Carson, always quick to follow orders, turned to face her. "What do you have in mind, Doc?" "We can't keep trying to hit them head-on. They figured out our patterns," she said, her tone sharp. "We need to confuse them, make them think we're weaker than we are." Sergeant Hill, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. "You mean we feign weakness, trick them into making a mistake?" Dr. Langley nodded. "Exactly. We'll simulate a failure in our shields, something they'll believe is a weakness, and when they close in for the kill, we hit them with everything we've got." There was a collective pause as the crew absorbed her plan. It was risky, but in a fight for survival, they had no choice but to take chances. "All right," Carson said, pulling up the necessary control panels. "We'll need to adjust the power levels manually, make it look like the shields are failing." As the crew began to implement the plan, Dr. Langley glanced at the main screen. The enemy fleet was still circling, watching them, studying them. Every move they made was under intense scrutiny. The alien ships, sleek and deadly, glided through space like hunters waiting for the right moment to strike. "They'll come at us in force," Dr. Langley murmured. "They'll think they've got us right where they want us." Carson's fingers flew over the control panel. "Shields down to 50%. Artificial malfunction engage. It should look real enough." The Sentinel's powerful shields flickered on the screen, their energy levels dropping as though the ship's systems were failing. The once unbreakable force field now appeared vulnerable, leaving the warship exposed. "There. Now we wait," Carson said, his voice taut with anxiety. The crew held their breath as the enemy ships moved closer, their speed increasing, sensing the moment of weakness. They were taking the bait. Their movements were swift, precise, closing in on the Sentinel. It wasn't long before the first wave of enemy ships shifted into attack formation, preparing to strike at the ship's exposed flank. But Dr. Langley wasn't nervous. If anything, she felt a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment. The moment they would show the invaders that humanity had far more to offer than they could ever expect. "Now," she commanded. Carson's fingers hammered down on the control panel. In an instant, the ship's true defenses roared to life. The Sentinel's weapon system fired with the precision of a seasoned warrior. The first round of fire struck the lead enemy ship square in the center, unleashing a powerful burst of energy that ripped through its shields and exploded the vessel in a fiery ball of light. The crew cheered, but Dr. Langley's voice quickly cut through the noise. "Stay focused. We've only just begun." The enemy ships reeled from the sudden turn of events, their formations breaking as they scrambled to adapt to the surprise attack. But humanity had the advantage now. The alien ships, so accustomed to their superior technology, had underestimated the cunning and resilience of Earth's defenders. The Sentinel's weapons were firing relentlessly, each blast striking true, each explosion weakening the enemy's resolve. The crew worked together seamlessly, coordinating each strike with military precision. Carson targeted the next alien ship, adjusting the ship's speed to stay out of the line of fire while delivering deadly, accurate shots. In the midst of the battle, the eye of the Sentinel spoke, its calm voice a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "Enemy shields are failing." Multiple vessels engaged in evasive maneuvers. It was working. The plan had worked. The aliens, once so confident in their ability to overwhelm humanity, were now being forced to fight for their survival. They had made a fatal error. They had underestimated Earth's ability to think outside the box. Dr. Langley didn't allow herself a moment of relief. There was still too much at stake. But the tide had shifted. The aliens were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. And as the Sentinel powered through the battle, humanity was showing them what true strength looked like. One by one, the enemy ships began to fall. The crew cheered again, their spirits lifting with every alien vessel destroyed. But Dr. Langley knew this wasn't over yet. There were still more ships out there, more threats to face. But for the first time, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel: hope. "We've got them on the ropes," Carson said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "But we need to finish this. Now." Dr. Langley nodded. "Prepare the final strike. We end this today." The crew moved with purpose as the final phase of their counterattack began. The enemy was beaten, but not yet broken, and humanity was ready to deliver the final blow. As the last few alien ships tried to regroup, the Sentinels' weapon systems prepared to unleash their full power, determined to finish the fight once and for all. The warship's systems hummed with energy, ready for the decisive strike that would determine Earth's fate. But as the enemy ships closed in for one last attempt to turn the tide, they realized too late that humanity was far from done. The battle was about to end, but not in their favor. The final round of fire exploded across the battlefield, and the enemy was no more. The victory and the aftermath. As the last alien ship disintegrated into space dust, the crew of the Sentinel erupted into cheers. The long and brutal battle was over. The invaders who had once thought themselves invincible had been utterly defeated. In that moment, humanity had proven something the galaxy would never forget. Earth was not a world to be underestimated. Dr. Langley stood at the command deck, staring at the glowing emptiness of space. The cold silence that followed the battle was heavy, but it was a silence filled with triumph. The hum of the ship's systems returning to normal was a reminder that their warship had been the key to their victory. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, knowing how much this moment meant to every single person on Earth. "We did it," Sergeant Hill said, stepping up beside her. His voice was hoarse, worn from the battle, but there was a smile on his face. "We really did it." Dr. Langley nodded, her gaze still fixed on the stars ahead. "It's not just about winning one battle. This was the first strike in a much larger war. We've shown them what humanity is capable of. But this fight is far from over." Lieutenant Carson walked up, his face still flushed with adrenaline. "We sent them running. They're not coming back anytime soon. They'll think twice before they try to invade again." But Dr. Langley wasn't convinced. "They'll regroup. They'll send more ships, more forces. It's only a matter of time." The crew knew she was right. This battle had been won, but the war was far from finished. The enemy would not simply retreat in defeat. They would learn, adapt, and return stronger. But that was a problem for another day. For now, humanity had claimed its first victory in a war that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. As the Sentinel began its journey back to Earth, the crew took a moment to reflect on the magnitude of what had just happened. They had faced overwhelming odds, but had emerged victorious. The battle had been brutal, and the toll had been high, but they had fought with everything they had, and it had paid off. The ship's AI reported that the enemy fleet had been entirely destroyed, but there were still scattered pockets of resistance across the galaxy. Dr. Langley knew their victory had sent a powerful message to every alien race. Earth was not a planet to be taken lightly. The news spread quickly across the universe. Messages of the Sentinel's victory reached every corner of the galaxy, sparking reactions from countless alien species. Some were terrified, others were curious, and a few, perhaps, were even impressed. But one thing was certain: humanity had made its mark. The galaxy would never forget what had happened on that battlefield. Back on Earth, the people celebrated, but the mood was tempered by the knowledge that this victory was only a stepping stone. The war for Earth's survival was far from over. Yet, as the crew of the Sentinel returned home, they could hold their heads high. They had shown the universe that humanity was not just a species to be ignored or dismissed. The world watched as Dr. Langley, Sergeant Hill, and Lieutenant Carson were welcomed back as heroes. They had led their crew through a seemingly impossible battle and had come out on top. The Sentinel had proven that even against the most advanced alien forces, humanity had the strength and ingenuity to fight back. Dr. Langley couldn't help but smile as the crowd cheered. For the first time in her life, she felt proud of what they had accomplished. This was more than a victory. It was a statement. The galaxy was now aware of Earth's potential, and they were not about to let that go unnoticed. "We've shown them that Earth will fight back," she said to herself, "and we will never stop fighting." The victory didn't erase the scars of war, nor did it promise an easy future. The galaxy had taken notice, but the alien forces that had attacked Earth were not the only threat. There were other species out there, others who might seek to challenge humanity for dominance. The Sentinels' victory was just the beginning. The fight for Earth's survival was far from over, and Dr. Langley knew they had to stay prepared. But in that moment, as the Sentinel drifted back to Earth, the crew knew one thing for sure. Humanity had just made its first step toward becoming a force that the galaxy could never ignore, and as long as they stood together, nothing could stop them. As the stars outside the ship stretched into lines of light, and Earth came into view on the horizon, the crew exchanged a knowing look. There was more to come. But for now, they had won, and that was enough. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Humanity had sent its message loud and clear. We are here, and we are not afraid. The new dawn. The Sentinel's return to Earth was nothing short of a spectacle. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, the world watched in awe. The skies were filled with military jets, and below, the streets were lined with crowds. Humanity had just defeated a galactic threat, and now they were celebrating their victory in a way that no one could have predicted. Dr. Langley, Sergeant Hill, and Lieutenant Carson stood at the head of the crew, waiting to disembark. The media cameras were flashing, capturing every moment. It was clear that the world had changed. In one sweeping battle, humanity had not only survived, but had sent a message to the galaxy. Earth was not to be underestimated. As the Sentinel touched down, Dr. Langley felt a strange sense of relief. There was a weight lifted from her shoulders, but it was quickly replaced with the knowledge that the battle for Earth was far from over. The victory over the alien invaders had been hard-earned, but the price was high. The warship had sustained significant damage, and several of the crew had been lost in battle. Still, they had managed to hold their ground. For now, that was enough. Walking down the gangplank, Dr. Langley couldn't help but marvel at the view before her. The crowds were cheering, waving flags, and singing songs of victory. Earth had not just defended itself, it had triumphed. The warship that had once been considered a relic of a forgotten age had proven itself to be the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. "It's hard to believe, isn't it?" Lieutenant Carson said, his voice a little hoarse from the battle, but still filled with pride. "Just a few days ago, we were fighting for our lives. Now look at this." Dr. Langley nodded. "It's surreal. But this is only the beginning. We've sent a message to the galaxy, but we have to stay vigilant. This victory doesn't guarantee our safety. We can't let our guard down." But for now, the celebrations continued. The Sentinel had become a symbol of human resilience, and the world recognized that. Earth had fought back against a superior force and had won. As the days passed, the news outlets around the world continued to report on the battle, focusing on the bravery of the crew and the technological marvel of the warship. It was a story that captivated every nation, and it became a rallying cry for a united humanity. People who had once lived in fear of alien invaders now stood proud, knowing that their species had the strength to defend itself. Yet, even as the world rejoiced, Dr. Langley knew that the enemy had not been completely eradicated. The galaxy was vast, and there were other alien species that had their eyes on Earth. Some would be watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Others might want to test humanity's resolve. For now, humanity had made its mark. But what came next was the true test. Would Earth be able to defend itself again? Or would the invaders return with more force than before? Dr. Langley knew one thing for certain. Humanity would not back down. The victory over the alien invaders was just the beginning of something much larger. The galaxy had seen the power of the Sentinel, and Earth's message had been loud and clear. They would fight. They would survive. But would they be ready for what came next? The celebrations on Earth continued for days, but the tension was building underneath it all. Governments, military leaders, and scientists all worked around the clock to ensure that Earth would remain protected. Earth's new position in the galaxy had to be secured, and that meant preparing for whatever might come next. The Sentinels' war stories spread like wildfire. The crew members were hailed as heroes, and the world was eager to hear about the details of their victory. But amidst the celebrations, Dr. Langley couldn't help but think about the alien fleet that had retreated. They hadn't been wiped out, merely forced to retreat. They would come back, stronger, smarter, and better prepared. And when they did, Earth had to be ready. The Sentinel had proven itself in battle, but Dr. Langley knew that Earth needed more than just one ship to fend off a galaxy of potential threats. The old ways of warfare would no longer be enough. Humanity had to evolve, adapt, and be prepared for whatever came next. And as she stood watching the Earth below, Dr. Langley made a vow. Humanity would not just survive, it would thrive. They would create an alliance, a force of unity between every nation on Earth. Together, they would stand tall, unyielding in the face of any threat. But even with all the plans being set in motion, Dr. Langley knew that their greatest weapon had been something far more profound than technology. It was their spirit. Humanity had proven that, even when facing insurmountable odds, they would never give up. And that, she thought, was their greatest strength. The Sentinel might have been humanity's first great victory, but it would not be their last. The battle for Earth was just the beginning. A new era for Earth. As the days turned into weeks, Earth began to recover from the intense conflict. The victory against the alien invaders had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy, and the message sent by humanity's strength was reverberating across the stars. The Sentinel, once a forgotten relic of Earth's military past, had now become the symbol of humanity's resilience and potential. But for Dr. Langley, Surgeon Hill, and the rest of the crew, the real challenge was just beginning. The United Nations held a series of emergency summits to discuss Earth's new place in the galaxy. The once quiet planet was now under the watchful eyes of numerous alien species. Some, like the invaders who had attempted the invasion, had learned the hard way that humanity was not to be underestimated. Others were curious, eager to understand what had driven a species so primitive to stand up and defeat such a powerful enemy. It wasn't long before Earth began receiving messages from other species, both allies and potential threats. There was a clear sense of unease as the world's leaders understood the gravity of their situation. They had won a battle, but they were not out of danger. The victory had given them a brief reprieve, but it also made Earth a target for other alien factions eager to test their might. Dr. Langley knew this was a turning point for humanity. No longer could Earth rely on isolation and secrecy. It was time for humanity to take its place on the galactic stage. It would require unprecedented unity, cooperation, and innovation to survive the threats of the future. With the Sentinel at the heart of Earth's defense, Dr. Langley and the newly formed Galactic Defense Council began to work on strategies for future defense. They worked tirelessly, coordinating with military experts and scientists from around the world. The Sentinel needed repairs, and soon there would be other ships in Earth's fleet, ships that would carry the banner of Earth's new era as a galactic power. But the work wasn't just about building ships. Dr. Langley's most pressing task was fostering alliances with other alien species. The universe was vast, and not all aliens would view humanity as an enemy. Some were peaceful, others were far more advanced. These potential allies could offer Earth the knowledge and technology it desperately needed to keep its people safe. Meanwhile, Surgeon Hill and Lieutenant Carson were reassigned to the Sentinel's crew. They would continue to serve as the warship's primary officers, training new crew members and coordinating defensive missions. Humanity's newly gained strength had to be maintained, and the lessons learned in battle could never be forgotten. The Sentinel would be Earth's first line of defense, but it would not be alone. A new generation of warships and spacecraft was already in the design phase, incorporating both human ingenuity and alien technologies. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations were watching, and Earth's next move would be crucial. But amid the preparations and planning, a nagging thought lingered in the back of Dr. Langley's mind. Despite their victory, the galaxy was still a dangerous place. For every ally that extended a hand, there would be 10 others who would see humanity as a threat, a resource to be exploited, or an obstacle to be removed. The fight for survival was far from over. And yet Dr. Langley had seen humanity's true strength. She had seen it in the way the crew of the Sentinel had fought, in the unity of Earth's people, and in the sheer willpower that had driven them to push back against the impossible odds. It was a power that no alien fleet could ever understand. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, and the message was clear. Earth would not be just another footnote in the history of the stars. Humanity was here to stay, and the galaxy would soon learn that when humans set their minds to something, nothing could stop them. As the sun set on Earth's horizon, Dr. Langley stood at the edge of a balcony, looking up at the stars. The universe was vast and unknown, but for the first time, humanity wasn't afraid. They had just proven to the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would face them head-on, united in their resolve. The Sentinel had awoken, and so had Earth. The new era had begun.